What if I told you that one man walked into a room full of the richest businessmen in Paris, showed them fake government documents, and convinced them to buy the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal? And every single one of them believed him. No one called the police, no one went to the press, they just paid. And the most disturbing part is not that he did it once, he did it twice. Same city, same tower, different victim. This is the true story of Victor Lustig, the most charming criminal who ever lived. And by the end of this video, you will understand something deeply uncomfortable about human nature, something that applies to you, to me, and to every decision we think we are making freely. Keep watching, because the real twist is not about him, it is about us. Act 1. The Setup. Paris, 1925. The city is still recovering from World War I. Money is tight, trust is fragile, and the Eiffel Tower, the iron giant that was only supposed to stand for 20 years, is now rusting, expensive to maintain, and a financial burden on the French government. Victor Lustig reads about this in a newspaper, and something clicks in his mind. Not the thought of a criminal, not the thought of a thief, the thought of a businessman. He sees an opportunity where no one else would dare to look. He sees a gap between what people believe is possible and what is actually possible. And in that gap, he builds his entire plan. Now, before we go further, let me tell you who Victor Lustig actually was. He was born in 1890 in a small town in what is now the Czech Republic. By the time he was a young man, he spoke 5 languages fluently. He had the posture of a diplomat, the smile of a priest, and the mind of a chess grandmaster. He had already run dozens of scams across Europe, but nothing on this scale, nothing even close. Because what he was about to do required something most criminals never develop: patience, preparation, and a terrifyingly deep understanding of how people think. Act 2. The Psychology. Here is what most people get wrong about con artists. They think the power is in the lie. It is not. The power is in making the other person want to believe. Victor Lustig never forced anyone to do anything. He never threatened, he never manipulated in the way we usually imagine manipulation. He did something far more subtle. He created a reality that was so emotionally appealing that the other person's brain did all the work for him. Think about the businessmen he was about to approach. These were men who spent their lives looking for deals, looking for edges, looking for moments where they could buy low and sell high. They were trained, almost biologically, to jump on an opportunity before someone else did. Lustig was not selling them a scam. He was selling them the feeling of being smarter than everyone else. And that feeling is the most expensive thing in the world. Act 3. The Con. Lustig rented a suite at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the most prestigious hotels in Paris, because the address on the letterhead matters, because humans judge credibility by environment before they ever judge it by logic. He created fake government stationery. He gave himself the title of Deputy General Director of the Ministère des Postes, and he invited 5 of the most prominent scrap metal dealers in Paris to a highly confidential meeting. He told them the following. The French government had made a difficult but necessary decision. The Eiffel Tower, due to extraordinary maintenance costs, was going to be sold for scrap metal. This information was not yet public. Any leak could cause a political scandal. Therefore, absolute discretion was required. He looked them in the eyes when he said this. He spoke slowly, with the weight of a man carrying a secret too large for one person. And every single one of those businessmen leaned forward in their chairs. Because Lustig had just handed them the most powerful drug known to the human brain: exclusive information. He took them on an official tour of the tower. He used the right technical language. He answered every question with calm authority. And then he invited them to submit sealed bids for the contract. One of the dealers, a man named André Poisson, was newer to the Parisian elite. He was slightly insecure about his status, slightly desperate to prove himself, and Lustig noticed this immediately. So he did something counterintuitive. He pulled Poisson aside privately and hinted that the process required a certain unofficial facilitation fee, a bribe. Now here is the psychological genius of this move. Most people would think a bribe request would raise alarm bells, but for Poisson, it did the opposite. Because corrupt bureaucracy was completely normal in 1920s France, the bribe made the whole thing feel more real, more official, more legitimate. Poisson paid the full asking price, tens of thousands of dollars in today's money, in cash, and Victor Lustig took a train to Vienna the same evening. Act 4. The twist inside the twist. Now here is where the story becomes genuinely disturbing. Poisson eventually realized what had happened. He understood he had been conned. He had handed a stranger an enormous amount of money for a tower that was never for sale. And he said nothing. Not a word, not a police report, not a single complaint. Because the embarrassment of admitting he had been fooled was more painful than the financial loss itself. He chose to absorb the damage in silence rather than risk the world knowing he had been deceived. And Lustig knew this would happen. He had calculated it in advance. He understood that the ego is a more powerful force than the law, that pride will keep a victim silent long after the criminal has disappeared. This is why he could return to Paris just a few months later and run the exact same con on a second dealer. He was caught eventually, not for the Eiffel Tower, for counterfeiting US currency on a massive scale. He was sent to Alcatraz, he escaped, he was recaptured, he died in prison in 1947. But even on his deathbed, those who knew him said they seemed entirely at peace, as if the whole thing had been worth it. Act 5. The real lesson. Now I want you to stop thinking about Victor Lustig for a moment and start thinking about yourself. Because the reason this story has survived 100 years is not because Lustig was extraordinary, it is because Poisson was ordinary, completely, recognizably, disturbingly ordinary. The same psychological mechanics that made a successful businessman hand over a fortune for a fictional contract are working inside your mind right now. The desire to be part of exclusive information, the fear of missing an opportunity before someone else takes it, the way a prestigious environment shuts down your critical thinking before you even realize it's happening, the way a small act of apparent honesty, like requesting a bribe, can paradoxically increase your trust in someone. When was the last time you made a decision because you were afraid of missing out? When was the last time an environment made you feel something was legitimate before you had any real evidence? When was the last time your ego stopped you from admitting you were wrong? This is not a story about a con artist. This is a story about the architecture of belief. The close. Final 60 seconds. Victor Lustig left behind a document that was found after his arrest. Researchers call it his personal rules for manipulation. 11 points he followed in every con he ever ran. Most of them have nothing to do with lying. They're about listening, about patience, about letting the other person construct the story themselves while you simply hold the door open. The best defense is not suspicion, it is self-awareness. Know what you want badly enough to be deceived by. Know which environments make you feel safe when you should be cautious. Know the difference between genuine opportunity and the feeling of opportunity. Because that feeling, that warm, electric, "this is finally my moment" feeling, is exactly where Victor Lustig lived. And somewhere out there, someone just like him is reading a newspaper right now, looking for the gap.